Okay, so today's topic is government impact on prices. We've learned about supply and demand, how prices are determined in a pure market economy. But we also know we do not have a pure market economy. We have a mixed economy where the government plays a role. In the circular flow, the government was right in the middle of things, collecting taxes, sending out transfer payments in the form of Social Security, Medicare, and the like, encouraging businesses to do things through subsidies, as well as demanding goods and services from the product market and labor and other factors of production from the resource market. So obviously, governments can expand or contract their role in the economy. They can charge large amounts of taxes. They can target taxes towards certain individuals or certain companies. There's a lot of philosophies that go into do that. So we're going to talk about different ways that government can have an impact on prices based on the philosophy that they take. So there are some opposing theories. One school of thought is referred to as supply side economics. Think of supply and demand. This is an economic theory that argues for policies that increase production, increase supply of a good. You know what happens to prices when there's more of something. When supply goes up, the price is going to come down. There's more of something that needs to be sold. So this policy encourages, or the idea behind it is that put lower taxes on businesses and just mess with businesses less, they will be able to focus on production, they will produce more, that will lower prices in the marketplace and be better for everybody. Now, the opposite side of this is demand side economics. This is where government programs put more money in consumers' hands in an effort to stimulate demand. Here, the idea is that we don't favor businesses who may or may not increase supply. Instead, take the money, put it in the hands of the people that can spend it, the consumers. They then will increase their demand for goods and services. More goods and services will be made as a result. More jobs will come, so on and so forth. So two opposing viewpoints. Lots of synonyms for these, pros and cons of each. Let's look at some on a quick little chart that you will fill in. So supply side on the left over here, demand side on the right. Let's compare these philosophies and what their goals are. Also things that they're known as, taxes, the role for government criticisms, and who are the people that usually support these two viewpoints. Well, first of all, supply side, also known as Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, or laissez-faire. I'll get into a few more things of what that's referring to in a second. Demand side economics, often known as Keynesian economics, named after John Maynard Keynes, a famous British economist during the 1930s, the Great Depression. So you can see where maybe where his philosophy came from. Now, the goal of supply side economics is economic growth, to have the economy continue to grow by providing more supply in the economy, which will lower prices, make people buy more stuff, more and more supply, the economy grows as a result. The goal for demand side economics is also economic growth. So they're both trying to accomplish the same thing. They both preach the gospel of economic growth in terms of that being the underlying goal of an economy. They just have very different ways about going about it. So the philosophy of supply side economics, deregulate. Let's shrink the role of government in the economy, cut taxes on businesses, and increase incentives to produce. So lower the taxes on businesses. If you do that, they'll be paying less money into the government. That will allow them to take that money to produce more things, hire more workers. Give them incentives to produce. We don't just want to cut taxes on them and have them put that money in their pocket and sit on it. Provide incentives in the economy for production to actually take place. You could let them write off the purchase of capital expenses, maybe let them write off the hiring of workers, give them tax breaks for doing that because then they're actually producing, not sitting on the money. Now, the philosophy of demand side economics is to increase spending and cut taxes on consumers to stimulate demand. So rather than cutting taxes on businesses, the government actually steps in, spends a little bit more money, creates some demand from the government itself for goods and services, and cuts taxes on the middle class and the lower classes so they will have more money to spend and they can then go out and purchase money from the businesses. So both are looking for growth, they just have different viewpoints on how to do it. Obviously the viewpoint on taxes, lower taxes on producers, that will increase supply. On the other side, the government obviously is staying out of the way. Small role for government. Government spends money to stimulate demand. Government regulates businesses. This one should have gone out of the way. This one's lower taxes on consumers to increase demand. Um, Government role in demand side economics. Government spends money to stimulate demand, and the government has a role to regulate businesses. More trust for business over here, more trust in the invisible hand, less trust for business on the demand side, less trust in the invisible hand to work things out, at least as Adam Smith described it. Criticism of supply-side economics. Not all tax cuts result in spending. Some of these tax cuts to businesses are going to end up in profit that is distributed to shareholders and not going to lead to more production and lower prices. And the argument there would be that this money never trickles down, as I'll describe to you in a second. It actually ends up in the hands of the wealthy and stays there. The criticism of demand side is that higher taxes discourage businesses. So if you keep taxes high on business, they will not expand. They won't hire workers, and it's essentially redistribution of wealth. You're taxing the wealthy and giving it to the poor to create this artificial demand that would not otherwise exist. Um, the supply side economics usually supported by conservatives, Republican Party, as we know, conservatives usually go with, and demand side economics usually associated with liberals and Democrats. This one finally filled in cut taxes on individuals to increase demand. So, want to increase demand with demand side economics, want to increase supply with supply side economics. They both have the same role, growth. Can we really say which one works? Not really, because we never really have one political party completely in charge to the point that they can institute their policies for a long enough period of time that we can say, hey, that really worked or that really did not work. So a couple of these words that go along with supply side economics. One is laissez-faire. That's French for let it be or leave it alone. It's a belief that private initiative in production is best when the government stays out of things. So businesses do fine when they're left alone and the invisible hand is allowed to work its magic. And then the trickle down effect. Supporters of supply side economics claim that high income businesses, if taxes are cut on them and they can produce more supply, eventually that benefit will trickle down through the economy. They will distribute the benefit to less wealthy individuals in the form of new jobs created in the expanded economy. So here the idea would be cut taxes on businesses. Those businesses will produce more. In order to produce more, they need more workers. They hire more workers, and that tax cut trickles down. Obviously, the counter argument is that it doesn't all trickle down. A lot of it ends up in the pockets of the wealthy, and it's really a tax cut that favors the wealthy at the expense of the poor. But two varying viewpoints. Um, like I said, they both have the same goal of achieving growth. There's just two philosophies of what the role of the government should be. Big government versus smaller government on the supply side. All right. We do have a mixed economy, and outside of simple taxation, the government does sometimes, rarely, but sometimes does take action to affect prices, to actually determine what the price of a particular product might be. One way that the government impacts prices, the most obvious, is through setting a minimum wage. Okay, salary is payment for labor. All right, it has to do with the supply of labor and the demand of labor. Well, a minimum wage is an artificial price. Um, it helps assure basic living standards for workers on the low end of the economic ladder, but without a minimum wage, supply and demand might tell us at times that the actual cost for labor is less than 7.25 an hour, as it's set at right now, or if it's been raised, whatever it's set at in the future. So this is government impacting prices, telling businesses that they cannot spend less than the 7.25 an hour, even if there was a supply of workers out there that were willing to work for less than 7.25 an hour. So that's a direct government impact on prices. Price controls also occur at the top end. So this is putting a price floor in place, a minimum wage. Price controls are a price ceiling, saying that prices cannot raise above a certain level. At the state and city level, sometimes, especially in urban areas where real estate is very condensed and there's lots of demand for it, the price for apartments can go relatively high. In New York City, the price for an apartment that's the size of our classroom would be somewhere in the $3,000 to $4,000 a month range for a rent like that. That's something that your average police officer, firefighter, someone living in that community cannot afford. So the government steps in and puts price ceilings on some rental units to make affordable housing for people that they need in their community, like firefighters, like um, police officers. So that's a price ceiling whereby if it was removed, you might be able to charge more for that item. That's a price control on the top end. And those do have effects. Um, Minimum wage can lead to some people not being employed as the minimum wage is raised. Some businesses will choose not to hire at that higher rate. And as price controls are put in place, um, sometimes people will choose not to supply the item if the price is not high enough. So are you not going to go out and build an apartment building if you can't charge what you feel the market rate is? That can lead to undersupply. So you might end up with a situation here where there's not enough workers being demanded, or here where there's not enough um, supply of housing to meet the demand that's in the market. Interest rates are controlled by action of the Federal Reserve System. Interest rates are what is the price to borrow money. If you go get a loan, you have to pay interest on that. The Federal Reserve System sets the interest rate, so they're setting what the price is to borrow money. They do that in an effort to control inflation. It is a rise. Inflation is one role that the government has. One goal is to maintain a steady rate, a low rate of inflation. Inflation is a rise in the general level of prices that's not resulting from supply and demand. It's not because people want more stuff. It's not because there's not enough stuff. It's because there is all of a sudden, for some reason, too much money chasing too few goods. The picture over here on the right is from post-World War I Germany, when they had what was called hyperinflation. If you recall from world history, Germany was being forced to pay off war reparations, pay for the damages they had done to other countries during the war. Well, to pay those debts, they started printing money so they could pay the other countries. And when there's more money flowing around and no more goods to meet the needs, prices skyrocketed and made the value of money virtually worthless. Here's a guy sitting on the street next to stacks of dollar bills. There's no threat because that stack of dollar bills could have only purchased him maybe a loaf of bread, or maybe not even something that valuable. So inflation is something that has to be kept under control. It's one goal of a government. And then the opposite of inflation is deflation. This is when prices fall without a change in supply or demand. And you might say, well, hey, prices are falling. What's the problem with that? Things are cheaper. But it can lead to what's called a deflationary spiral when there's a reduction in the money supply. And this is not good either. When there's less money out there, um, people are not able to purchase goods and services. Jobs get eliminated, all sorts of problems in this, as the video that you'll watch in a second will show. So the government does impact our economy in a multitude of ways. We'll learn more about how they try to influence and control inflation in the next unit when we learn about monetary policy. But these are some government impacts, just a brief overview of the philosophy of government in the middle of our mixed economy.